In contrast to Kemi Badenoch's reluctance to commit about Trump's Riviera, about Trump's idea of turning Gaza into a Riviera, she says that in contrast to Keir Starmer's statement that the Palestinians must be allowed home, she says, I'm not going to get into the geopolitics of Israel at the moment. But in contrast to that, and her hesitation, let's say, I mean, she doesn't hesitate about most, does she? Brace, brace! But anyway, in contrast to that, Nigel Farage knows exactly what he's talking about. Donald Trump's latest proposal to take over Gaza and transform it into the Riviera of the Middle East is yet another display of his signature brand of grandiosity and transactional deal-making, and at its core, it is an extraordinary suggestion that appears detached from political and global reality. And the idea has sparked global condemnation, with critics labelling it as nothing short of ethnic cleansing, while supporters, like Nigel Farage, have dismissed concerns in favour of the supposed economic potential of the plan. During a press conference with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Trump declared that the Gaza thing has never worked, and that a US-Israel-led project to develop it would bring peace and prosperity. He suggested that a better piece of land might be found for displaced Palestinians, an ominous remark that implies mass displacement rather than reconstruction. And the plan, as vague as it is provocative, envisages a Las Vegas-style redevelopment, complete with casinos, hotels, and nightlife. And the Farage response? Comedy or complicity? I love that notion. The thought that wealthy, wonderful, thriving place with well-paid jobs, casinos, nightlife, it all sounds very appealing to me. It all sounds very appealing to me. I'm not shallow. His remarks made during a Westminster press conference were more about personal amusement than serious engagement with the proposal's implications. He quickly distanced himself from taking any responsibility for Trump's pronouncements, instead insisting that he is not here to answer for everything the Trump administration has to say. But what does a reaction reveal? Farage's glib endorsement sidesteps the glaring issue. Gaza is not a blank slate. It's a home state. It's a land with a population, a history of suffering, a deep-rooted struggle for self-determination. And while Farage may see glamour, most of the world sees something much darker. The plan has been met with widespread condemnation, with many nations rejecting what they perceive as a Trump-backed effort to forcibly remove Palestinians from Gaza, erase its historical and political identity. And the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer was unequivocal in Parliament. They must be allowed home. They must be allowed to rebuild. And we should be with them in that rebuild on the way to a two-state solution. The very notion of a US-led takeover ignores both international law and the basic principles of self-determination. It's an audacious, if absurd, echo of 19th century colonial land grabs, a form of neo-imperialism wrapped in the language of economic regeneration. And those states that are horrified by this should immediately recognize Palestine as a state, as a nation. Trump's vision recalls other moments in history where world leaders tried to civilize war-torn or occupied lands for economic benefit. Consider Britain's attempts to reshape Palestine during the Mandate era, or post-war American visions of Vietnam and Iraq, all of which met resistance, insurgency, and eventual failure. The idea that outside powers can simply impose development ignores the core issue of sovereignty. This proposal is not merely an offhand comment. Trump's approach to foreign policy has always been about deals and leverage, and whether through trade, tariffs, diplomatic brinkmanship, or real estate negotiations, his political instincts are transactional rather than diplomatic. And in this case, Trump's remarks serve several purposes: appealing to pro-Israel, anti-Palestinian sentiment among his base, framing himself as a visionary problem solver, and creating a new media distraction from domestic issues. But these tactics fail to acknowledge the core problems. Gaza's humanitarian crisis is not a real estate opportunity. Farage's reaction encapsulates his role in international politics, a provocateur rather than a policymaker. And his alignment with Trump, another provocateur, is not ideological but opportunistic. He admires Trump's ability to win, to dominate media cycles, to challenge establishment politics. But this alignment forces him into an uncomfortable position, defending the indefensible while laughing it off. The irony, of course, is that Farage has built his career on opposing foreign interference in British affairs, from the EU to migration, and yet he seems perfectly at ease with the idea of a foreign power imposing rule over Gaza. The idea of transforming Gaza into a Riviera is at best a fantasy divorced from reality. At worst, it's a dangerous precedent for dispossession and forced displacement, and Trump's comments demonstrate his cavalier approach to global crises, while Farage's reaction underscores his habit of making light of a serious issue. Ultimately, Gaza's future must be shaped by its own people, not by the whims of a former real estate mogul and a British politician turned broadcaster. The world has seen too many grand designs imposed on unwilling populations, and history suggests they always end in disaster. Casinos and cocktail bars won't erase the pain of a displaced people at all, and as Starmer says, the first priority is to get get the hostages released, and to and to establish a move towards a two-state solution. I think that means we should be recognizing Palestine as a state as fast as possible.